So welcome everyone, here we are, episode 19. We're going to be discussing inspiration, but not just inspiration as in, but actually the inspiration that comes from alchemy, which is the changing of something into something else. Once described it as lighting the blue touch paper and standing well back and waiting to see what happens. And that's what happens occasionally when we're having conversations and somebody will just say one word and then something lights up in your brain. Your mind just goes scuttling away around, looking at all the corners to see what they can find that is glinting away, but not quite there yet. And then when you find it, oh, well, there used to be an advert for certain chocolates. And when you opened the box, your face lit up because it was like gold. So it's a little bit like that. So let's say hello to everybody. We'll start with Angela.
Hello. I was supposed to say more, yeah.
Well, you can if you want to. I mean, everybody knows who you are anyway.
Unless they've never seen us before.
This is also true.
Yeah. So I do lots of things, but predominantly when I'm talking on here, I'm talking about the fact that I work with kinesiology. I work with transformational coaching and with hypnotherapy. So a little bit of energy-based work, a little bit of talking-based work, and everything in between.
So a little bit of alchemy with the physiology, perhaps.
Perhaps.
Monica.
Thank you. My name is Monica, and the name of my business is actually Alchemy, and I do a range of things as well. So a lot of it is about the body and energy, and I'm called an embodied leadership coach, so it's leading through the body, and I'm a coaching supervisor as well, and I love dialogue work, having courageous conversations. So that's me, and I love magic and alchemy.
Groovy. Pauline. We haven't seen you for a while. Where have you been?
Where have I been? I've been busy.
Good. That's always good to hear.
I'm Pauline Gamlin. I'm from Taunton in Somerset, and I'm a life and mindset coach. My business is called Fresh Choice Feelings. And yeah, it's all about choice.
Groovy. Mary, last but not least.
Last but not least, I'm Mary Corbett, and I'm also a coach who loves taking people who are overwhelmed and swamped with work and getting back some rhythm and flow into their lives so that they actually experience growth and they develop and they feel happy. That's what I'm about. So I end up doing some problem solving, some mindset work, and lots of coaching in the middle.
It's interesting though, isn't it, that basically what we are really doing in a way is inspiring people to find their own resources and to actually just let them focus, maybe change their perspective slightly. And isn't it funny how maybe, as I said before, one word can take you down a path, one sentence can take you down a long path of you wouldn't know where until you actually go there.
And before we go there, you've not introduced yourself.
But I don't need introduction.
Yes, you do.
I'm just the wee mouthpiece in the corner here. Well, in the middle.
Or the corner. Depends on who's looking at it and who's recording it, right?
Yeah, this is true. This is very true. But anyway, so I'm Leslie Marsh, and I'm also a coach and a hypnotherapist. And among other things, I do a little bit with relaxation and stress as well. But one of the things that I really like to do is explore what's going on when people get inspired. And the one thing that I do love to do is to be inspired myself. And I've actually managed to do it for myself too, which is great because then I don't have to depend on anybody else to do it for me. I think that that's where we all really want to be going, is inspiring ourselves to do whatever it is that makes us feel really good about life. So that's basically what I am doing. That's me.
Okay, you can continue now.
Thank you. So basically, it's a little bit like Alice in Through the Looking Glass in a certain way. when we start to get inspired, I don't know about you guys, but it's never a case of it was never there. It's always a case of a wee ember, like you suggested earlier on, Monica, a wee ember that's just sitting there before the fire dies out, and a little bit of a on it will allow it to just go again and open up. And it's amazing what kind of blazes you can get from that one wee ember. Can you remember a time when it happened to you recently, perhaps? Monica.
And actually, I was invited to work with a group in London, and it was around working with them in an embodied way. It was their first time coming together after, COVID. And so it was about reconnecting to their inner fire. And it was fascinating because from the moment I went, first I was kind of thinking going to London, there's going to be all this thing about travel and COVID and certs and things. But actually, I was hugely inspired by them. They had their timeline up on the wall of, when they had started. By the time I finished working with them at the end of the day, I was on fire. It was incredible. They were so inspiring and so open that I couldn't help but be inspired. So it was really I'm still kind of trying to figure out how all of that happened, but it was a pure an energy that was there. It was incredible.
I'm trying to think of a better way of saying it, but actually I can't, so I'm just going to say it. It was kind of infectious.
Exactly. It's positive contamination.
Yeah. It's like laughter. It's a bit of a social disease as well. Once one person starts, everybody starts going. So
can we have a booster shot for that?
I think we should. I think basically that's what we could be looking at is getting a boost of energy, an energetic boost of positive feelings, and not even positive feelings, because there's a whole thing about toxic positivity, which we might look at next time. But
did I write that down?
Yeah. No, it's all right, we're recording. So but basically it's a case of when we're doing it and we're understanding what it is that we're doing, it's the optimism that we need to be looking at. There needs to be a balance somewhere, and optimism is a better, for me, word, because it leaves it open to, you're not going full pelt 100 miles an hour and jumping up and down and going, yes, it's great, it's wonderful, it's fantastic, oh yes. And then you kind of walk out the room and suddenly it's like someone pulled your batteries out, because you're not, that room is the only place that you've anchored that inspiration and that way of doing things. So when you come home and you traveled home on the bus or in the car, and you go through your front door and there's your couch and the cat or the husband, whichever one comes first. And
neither, thanks.
Yeah, well,
But I think there's something interesting about the distinction that, well, I always perceive it between somebody who motivates me with their positivity and their energy. But when I'm inspired, it's all in me. Inspirational stuff is all internal to me. I don't need anybody. Somebody else might trigger it, but the inspiration is always very much an internal journey and an internal process. And I think it's actually quieter. In a sense that it just bubbles. It's just there. There's an ease with it. That the hyper super powered motivational people, no, can't deal with those two.
It's very tiring. It really is.
I think for me it depends on the situation. So for some things I will have that mile a minute brain going. So I'm talking a mile a minute to try and catch up and keep up with my brain. But other times it's just that light bulb dawning realization of course. And that's all it takes. It doesn't necessarily then need to be that mile a minute thought process, because it's just there. I mean, so I tend to have both.
Yeah, I'm just going to throw a cultural reference in here that might be a bit old for some people, but there was a character in Friends called Phoebe, and I sometimes have a Phoebe moment where somebody will be talking to me or I'll be doing something and suddenly I go, and it just, you know, the vocabulary goes because basically everything's coming in just so fast. It's unbelievable. It's like somebody's just done an information dump into the back of my brain, and suddenly it all wants to come out at once. And that's when I have to start writing things down, because if I don't write it down, it will just go straight out again and never be seen again. But there's an excitement, there's an idea, and I know that it's inside. I know that that trigger has been pulled. And what's happened is that there's a switch going on inside me. And suddenly it's like all singing, all dancing. Look, I'm here. Look at me. I want to talk to you now. And so, yeah, and it has to be like right now, not in 5 minutes, right now. And I think that might be a little bit ADD, but who knows? What about you, Pauline?
And what?
As far as
Being
inspiration goes,
inspired.
yeah.
Yeah, it tends to be a bit more quiet for me. Recently, I was inspired by Louise Hay. I was listening to one of her, what do they call them? Like blogs.
A podcast?
Well, yeah, podcast. That's probably what it was. About self-belief, and she came up with, you know, if there's not a support group around you, go and start one. And that was the thing. It was a bit of a light bulb moment, thinking, oh yeah, I could do that. So yes, my business might be changing its form.
Well, there you go. This is the interesting thing, though. It's like there's a whole, and here I go. I'm having a vision of things, Angela, with my eyes open. I've got a picture in my head at the moment of this wonderful room with shelves and interestingly shaped bottles and things on it, with interestingly intricate things inside. Some have got bubbles, some haven't, some are like not liquid, but they're powder, some are so many different things. And in the middle of this room is this great big cauldron. And all it takes...
Doesn't surprise me.
No, it doesn't surprise me either, because this is me after all. And it's like one of those things that it depends on what bottles are taken down and what is put in and how many pinches, and suddenly it goes woomph. And there's your potion, there's your alchemy, there's the thing that's going to change everything.
There's the magic.
There's the magic. And of course, going back to Alice in Wonderland, it's got a little label on it that says, drink me.
Or eat me.
Or eat me, yeah. If it looks like puff candy, I'm there.
I'm just noticing I'm inspired by the word choice in Pauline's little logo there. And you know, there's something around, particularly at the moment, the way things are, choosing to be inspired. I mean, we can choose every day. It's like when you get out of bed, you put your 2 feet on the ground and you can make a choice around, am I going to be affected by the things that are in the news and what I read? Or actually, am I going to nourish myself with inspiration, maybe by lighting a candle when I have my breakfast, or maybe by reading something inspirational that sets me up for the day, maybe just a quotation that I have on the wall that inspires me and, you know, brings a smile to my face. So there's something about choosing to inspire ourselves, or choosing to, it's like the 2 wolves. You can feed the wolf that kind of gets you down, or you can feed the wolf that inspires you and raises up your energy.
Absolutely, yes.
I think it has been interesting. I was visiting a lady this afternoon who is in, I think she must be 86 at this stage. And I haven't seen her since pre-COVID. Because she went through some major health issues, and I was petrified that even though I was in isolation, could possibly bring something to her. I just said, "Oh, I'm not." But she turned around and said, "Mary, no, come in. I don't, just come in. If it's my time, it's my time. And if it's not, it's not.
Oh,
But she was very clear about, I don't listen to the news. It brings me down. So she even, you know, she makes that conscious choice of what she is prepared to allow into her world every day.
Yeah.
And it makes such a big difference. But I think there's a lot of people drifting rather than making the choices. And I do worry that they're missing out on this wonderful capacity to be inspired by the world, because they're just drifting. They're not making the choices, conscious choices.
Yeah, there's a lot of being in limbo going on.
Yeah.
But sometimes it's comfy to be in limbo, and that's the challenge.
Yeah, but you don't want to make it your postcode.
True. But there's also there is merit in allowing yourself to be in limbo, because otherwise, if you're always in that inspiration point, does that then not get exhausting? Do you need the downtime in between as well to have that little drift before you can then get that next spark?
Well, basically, that's the whole point of a spark, is it has a life limit thing going on. It's like that. You get the woomph, and then it dies down into a nice, it puts your gas on a peak to a certain extent. You know, it has a peak and a trough. But then if you're very lucky, you have a little one that keeps it going for a little while. It just keeps going like a little heartbeat. So for me, I think it's, you see, there's one person in this room recently who's been ticking boxes like that with me, particularly, especially on LinkedIn, Mary Corbett. Asking these questions every morning while I'm sitting, eating my porridge and trying to read my pocket things. And then I have to look at LinkedIn to make sure I'm not supposed to be speaking to somebody at that time in the morning. And basically, there's this question that pops up in my notifications. What are you doing with this? And, you know, here's a poll. And I'm like, ooh,
She
can't
makes
resist
me
a poll.
think.
I know.
It's not always a good thing.
I don't know. It's like, hang on a minute. Do I want my mind working that hard at this time in the morning? Not entirely sure. But at the same time, it does waken things up, and it does actually, you know, oh, hang on a minute. I'm going to have to think about that one. Where would I go with that? And sometimes, Mary, you allow me to surprise myself.
Good. That's a good thing. And
I like that.
get to choose, and you get to choose whether, you know, just because we get a notification to say I've posted something, you still make a choice to go in and look at it, because you don't get enough detail on LinkedIn to know what it's about.
But you know,
I
click on
know.
it.
You know, Mary, I'm a nosy bugger, and I've got to go and have a look.
I must admit, I was 54 notifications this morning. I thought I really better go and see what's going on.
But that's the thing about it. None of us, I think, will be inspired the same way, with the same fuse, with the same spark.
No, and I have to, if you set out to be, like, I don't set out in writing those little snippets to be inspiring, but I am more inclined to be setting out to get people just to ask themselves a question, just to think a bit. If inspiration comes, that's almost separate. That's a bonus. That's like getting, you know, hitting the jackpot. If I say somebody's been inspired by something I wrote, if they've actually just questioned, I'll feel I've done a good job. Or if I've given, but if they say sparked an inspiration, they got inspired by it, that's absolutely, that's I've hit the jackpot when I achieve that.
It's interesting though. It's kind of, there's kind of a responsibility attached to it as well, in a way. Because it's like, I don't know about you, but there's been a couple of times where it's happened to me that somebody's come back to me about something that I've said that I didn't even realize, because I wasn't paying attention to what I was doing at the time. And I was probably, to be quite frank, I was probably having a moan at the time about something. I know you find that really, really hard to believe, Angela, that I could moan, you know, past bloody master at it. But there you go. And it's a hobby. I enjoy it. It keeps me happy.
I do find it challenging though, that when you get, I'm in danger of going off the point now, that people somehow see your post 2 or 3 weeks later and you're there going, I don't remember a word of what I wrote that day. Or they give you a message. And what? I have no idea what you're talking about. It's long gone from my world. Haven't a clue.
This is true.
But-
Social
but it
media is a bit
shows
like
that-
dreaming.
But it shows that your inspiration that you have today can then potentially be inspiring people next week, the week after, the week after
10 years
that.
from now.
It's true.
And that's powerful in its own.
But
Yeah.
then if you were like Angela, you would keep a spreadsheet of everything that you wrote so that you would be able to look back and say, oh yeah, hang on a minute, that was 2 o'clock on Monday morning. Yeah, I remember that.
No, I don't have proper.
I'm not quite that
process driven on
bad.
it. I'm not process driven when it comes to writing. Just am not.
If I was process driven when it came to writing, I'd do more of it.
Yeah, I think
But
it's,
I do want to acknowledge Leslie. Thank you. It's nice to know that sometimes I spark some thought. Thank you.
oh no, you're welcome. I love it. It's, you know, anything that gets my brain going and I can go down a rabbit hole, it's much better than what I'm supposed to be doing.
Yeah,
It really
thank you, Mary. I've had a rest from having to do it recently.
Your time is coming again. do. I hope that wasn't product placement. But anyway.
Well, I'm curious. I have a question.
Uh-huh.
When we talk about we talk about the alchemy of inspiration, but what makes it magic?
That's the interesting thing about it, is that there are rooms in our minds that we don't necessarily have an official key to. There seems to be a space in there where things happen and it's the actual process of the happenings that open the doors for us to be able to see. And I think that we are not always consciously aware of how these things happen. We're still not totally consciously aware of how thought works. We have the machinery, we have the GABA and the dopamine and the serotonin and the oxytocin and all the other nice little chemicals that are washing about in our brains most of the time. However, when it comes to how it inspires and sparks something else off, that again is an individual thing. For some people, it's going to be something that they've been mulling over for a long time. It could be that they daydream. It could be Einstein did it when he was sick. The theory of relativity came when he had the flu. You know, so he was in an altered state of being. So there's a connection somewhere, for me anyway, there's a connection somewhere that's outside of myself, but inside of myself at the same time, which could bring us on as a whole different group.
But when you've got all the whole neurodiversity stuff going on as well, everybody's brain works slightly differently. Yes,
yeah.
there's massive commonalities, but there's also big chunks that are different. And I think it is that piece that what's the magic piece for me is not necessarily going to be the magic piece for the next person.
But there is magic in the mundane as well. I mean, we tend to forget about how magical it is to watch a sunrise or to watch a flower bloom or to watch frost crystallize on your window, which is more likely these days. But it's one of those things that we don't notice it, we're not focusing on it, so it's not magic to us anymore. It's a bother, or oh yeah, that's quite nice, it means I can get the t-shirt on and I can get the legs out and see what happens, you know, or you know, not in the case of mine. But it's a case of when we see these things, it's mundane to us because it's an everyday thing. Oh yeah, it's that season, I'm used to that. It kind of loses its magic
Unless you take that step back and look at
and
it.
actually refocus and really look at it again and start to wonder. I wonder how that works.
I think you might have to have some I wonder, do we have to have a sense of curiosity for the alchemy of inspiration to become magical?
I'm not entirely sure we would be where we are now if we didn't have curiosity. Because we'd just be quite happy sitting where we were doing nothing, getting eaten by bears and things. It's surely the curious mind that allows us to. My favorite wonder is how Ugg and Og saw a wolf and thought, I've got to get me one of those and make it work for me. You know, were they going out hunting and then at one point watched the wolves, the way that they worked, and then decided that perhaps, oh, maybe we could do that. And then maybe they tripped over a couple of cubs and then decided to steal them and take them back and look after them? Was it a fact of a little bit of a situation where things were being brought together in that the wolves saw all these bones getting chucked out of the cave and thought, oh, easy food. Let's make a bit of a bargain here. You know, you feed me, I'll work for you, and, you know, toss you the odd bone as well. But it's that, to me, is a case of there was thought patterns there. There was ideas. There was a curiosity about how does that animal do that? And how can I do that so that I can feed myself and the rest of the family? Because they're doing it really well. So maybe if I follow them, I'll get to find something, and maybe I'll get to take what's left. And then at one point there became a relationship and we started playing, and now we've got things like chihuahuas. Which actually have a lot more wolf in them than you would think.
Really?
But yeah,
So,
I mean,
the curiosity is the key on that one, isn't it?
yeah. But the magic is in making it happen, really, isn't it?
So it's having the curiosity is one thing, but it's being able to then harness it.
Mm.
Are you saying is the magic?
Yeah, it's never one thing. It's never one thing. How many times have you started to do something and you've thought about something and you thought it would work one way, and suddenly it's become its own animal, its own beast, and it's taken legs and started
Far
to run.
too often.
Yeah.
Sometimes it's when you give up, when you've surrendered and thought, I can't do this, that something else comes through that you couldn't have imagined. Or even sometimes in a conversation, whether it's, you know, with two people or a group, it starts off and it kind of, it's like it enters another realm altogether, and something really exciting comes through from the conversation that the beginnings of the conversation didn't look like it could ever create that. So it's almost like we enter into a different space, a different kind of energy, because we're sparking off each other and something else becomes possible.
And that's what we're doing just now. We're using alchemy of language and connection through a machine that is using waves that are there naturally. We can't see them, we can't feel them, but we plug this in, we tap that switch, and suddenly there you are from wherever you are in the world. And we're talking to each other. Now that actually, if you were to take that back to medieval times, the Renaissance or anywhere like that, and you kind of took your thing and you went, look at this. And of course it would have to be a recording because they wouldn't have Wi-Fi at that point. But it's the same way as if you were to take a match into the deepest depths of the jungles a while back. I mean, they're all wearing football shirts now, but you know, a matchstick, and you went to light a match, it would be, oh, you can control fire. And yet to us, it's an everyday thing. So there's so many different things that people do. And in such a short space of time, we're doing this. It's only been a few hundred years. And yet now look where we are. Now we haven't been on the planet that long, really. So
and actually, if you'd gone back 2 years, you probably wouldn't have even thought of doing something like this.
Yeah.
Oh, would never have entered your heads to try doing it.
I mean, there was in the 80s when the phones were as big as houses, the mobile ones, and you had to have muscles like Arnold Schwarzenegger just to dial them.
And the suitcase for the battery.
Yeah. And we were told then, well, there's going to be a time when everybody's going to have their own computer, they're going to have their own access to this in their house, and you're going to be able to not have to go on a commute and work from home. And actually, we were so ingrained in the idea that we went to work because we kind of like that's home, that's work situation.
And it was habit.
And it was
and the
habit
norm.
and a familiar thing. But it also gave a mindset situation. It gave us okay, that's my home persona. That's where I do that. And this is where I come into this and become a slightly different person, really, because I have a job to do and now I'm going to focus that way. And that's an alchemical change when you think about it. From being a mother, sister, brother, personage, this family person, and then suddenly into a boss or a colleague or a manager or, just a worker bee, which is the most important one, really. But there is an alchemical change there in the way that we perceive what we're doing and how we're being in life.
And as you're speaking, Leslie, I mean, what's coming into my mind is the whole thing of vision. Which comes first? It's like chicken and egg. Is it vision and inspiration, or inspiration and vision and intention? That kind of, those ingredients of alchemy.
And then you've got the stoppers. Those thoughts that are like, and sometimes it's for some of us hearing people's voices that say, you can't do that. What makes you think that that's going to work? Never work.
And that's where Mary comes in, right?
Yeah,
That's right.
that's where Mary comes in.
But one of the things that I find really curious is that you mentioned it earlier, that if we have be the creators of our own inspiration rather than looking from it from the outside, is that if we could tap into, here's how you can inspire yourself every day. And we could tell them, this is all you have to do A, B, and C, and you could be inspired every day. People would love it but would they?
But would it lose the magic?
Would it lose the magic?
Possibly not, because you never know what's going to happen. You never
But there is
really know
that
what's going to
possibility
happen
as well, though, isn't there?
Yeah.
Yeah.
It could go either way. And again, it could go either way for every different person.
Well, put it this way. We have all this internet thing. That was kind of a magical thing. That was a kind of alchemical thing. And now all we do with it is look at YouTube for cats. Or this. And, and it's a case of, how did that happen? We got so comfortable with it so fast. And that's got to do with
don't get me wrong, I'm never going to get comfortable looking at YouTube for cats. It's not going to happen.
No, I wasn't talking about that. You would go down that road, wouldn't you?
You started it.
Or dogs, funny dogs, whatever.
Okay.
Funny animals. What was I going to say? Don't know. It was a case of basically we've got so comfortable so fast, and the uptake is even faster because our children are being born into an environment where that's normal. It's not something that's to be, I'm not entirely sure if I can work that. How does that go?
So I've then got the flip side of that, in the fact that yes, children are being born into being able to use the devices, but they're only going in and they're tapping the apps. Currently, through education, I don't believe that the uptake of people to actually develop the apps and programming code is there, because what you actually find is using social media so much and using all these apps so much, it actually kills off your creativity.
Yeah.
And potentially kills off your curiosity, because if I just have to pick up my phone and tap that app and I've got what I need, I don't have to be curious. I don't have to go and learn these things. And I think that we may find that if we're not careful, we're going to get to a point where we're not going to have the people coming through underneath us that are born with this technology are then going to be able to develop this technology going forwards, because the creativity and the curiosity isn't there.
Well,
And
yeah,
I suspect it's the curiosity is the one. Is that somehow we've got to keep that sense of the curious.
And the wonder.
And wonder.
But you have to get them off the devices first, to a certain extent.
Or maybe you have to figure out a way to keep them curious within the devices.
Well, the
Yes.
interesting thing is that we've kind of shortened their attention span so much that if they can't find it on the first page of Google, it doesn't exist.
Yeah, but that's not just youngsters these days. That's been quite a while. That's been the case.
I know. I mean, I think I said it before, but I got my godson a dictionary at one point, and he couldn't find the word on the first page, and so he decided that it didn't exist because he was more used to going into a computer and typing in the letters and having all these screeds of information come up, which basically is a model of what happens in your mind when it comes to seeking memories and looking for things that are, you will like this. If you go for this,
Yeah.
maybe you would like to look at this.
And we don't even have to search anymore. We can just use our voice and talk to our devices and say, what's the answer to this question?
Well, you do. I refuse to have it in the house.
Well, it's on your phone.
Still
always
refuse
off.
to use it.
But it's available
Gagged.
is all I'm saying.
It's
So it's on your
gagged.
phone, it's on your computers, it's on any other devices that you may purchase. I mean, in the room I'm in just now, I think I've got 3 devices that will do that for me.
Yeah, but I still want to be able to turn on things by myself. Don't want a machine to do it for me. I still
So
have arms and legs.
I must admit, none of the ones in here are actually voice activated because obviously I work with clients, but it is, there is that possibility that it's going to get to a point that we're not going to have to even type it.
Yeah, so basically, are we being turned into isolated homebodies?
Perhaps, or is it going to become like the Wall-E film, the Disney film, where everyone's in their little chairs and don't really have to think or do anything because all the machines do it for them?
Oh, well, we've got that already, haven't we? Because we've got companies coming to our doors with packets of crackers that we might have lost or not, forgotten to get at the shops, if we ever did go to the shops in the first place. I mean, the fact that somebody's prepared to pay 10 quid for an onion just is beyond me.
And I suppose, I'm going back to the word choice again. There's something around at what point do we give away our power to machines, or at what point do we offer children these devices instead of allowing them to be curious and play? They say sometimes if you when children get presents, sometimes they're more interested in the box than the actual thing that's in it, and all the different things they can do with the box. So yeah, I think choice is an important thing, our conscious choice around how we consume, how we use our energy, how we, where we put our attention. It feels important.
But again, since the well, probably the late 60s, early 70s, the box in the corner of the room has been a babysitter. And that's where they get their choices from. Because earlier and earlier every year, what we're seeing is this little inspirational program called an advert. Have this toy. Be cool at school. Have this toy. And it's suddenly there's a rush on all these toys because every kid wants to be cool and have this toy. But there are other choices out there that they don't look at because that's not the one that's going to be cool.
And it doesn't allow for the kind of individual aspect of each child, because, if they didn't have those ads, what would they be interested in? What would they, where would they put their attention?
But then at the same time, are the adverts fading a little bit? Because first of all, you've got the different machines that you can fast forward to the adverts, which obviously we've had for a while. But you've also now got all these streaming services that don't carry adverts.
I don't have any of them.
But a lot of the in the corner babysitters is a case of you stick on Netflix, you pick whichever series has got 50 episodes of your kid's cartoon, and you hit play. And it'll play for about 5 hours until it says, "Are you still watching?"
Yeah, because it's watching you.
No, because it thinks you might be falling asleep. Or
So
you've
it's
left it
watching
playing.
you.
How do you know that?
I may have binge watched some shows.
Angela chooses to binge occasionally.
I may also have
How do you know that?
I may also have a nephew who I was actually talking about this very topic this morning about. And there's one particular cartoon. There's my sister-in-law said there's about 50 episodes in the first series, and you just hit play.
Gosh.
No.
What's that doing to their brains, though?
It's making him laugh, because actually when I was on the phone to her, all I could hear in the background was him properly giggling, which was lovely to hear. And then we had to go because he turned and says, hungry. So obviously he wasn't watching it all the way through. But yeah.
No, I'm hungry. Please, can I have?
He's 2.
So?
He's not got sentences yet.
He's too young.
He's 2 and he's sitting watching 5 hours worth of cartoons?
But I don't know
Wow.
if he's watching 5 hours worth of cartoons. I just know from my binge watching that it's about 4 or 5 episodes before it tells you, are you still here?
Yeah.
Yeah,
But
I think
it
if I
is-
heard a machine say that, I would be extremely upset. Although I did enjoy at one point when I was using Google Maps in the car, and the voice came on, and I swore at it, and it came back and said, "Well, that's not very nice."
See, so you must have the audio stuff switched on your phone if she responded to say that's not very nice.
Only when I use Google Maps, if I ever use Google Maps. I
So
very rarely use it.
I've got all the sound turned off on my Google Maps. And
Yeah.
that's some nice product placement. And we'll get sponsored by Google Maps.
Who knows?
But I do think it's going to be interesting is to, given that children are now having a very different set of experiences than the previous, even so far as the homeschooling with COVID, the learning through the screen, they've had a whole bunch of things at a time when their brains are, their neuroplasticity is second to none. So it's going to have an impact on them. And we actually don't know what impact it's going to have. We actually don't know. They may be even more creative for all we know. They might be more discerning, more demanding. That it might actually create all sorts of different things. We don't actually know. But what we do know is they will adapt, because human beings adapt.
We don't know how they're going to adapt, though.
But we don't know how they're going to adapt.
But then look at how quickly we did adapt last year.
Even as adults, and we wouldn't be as adaptive as children are. So I sometimes think, maybe the experiences they're having through technology will have a different alchemy, will have a result in different types of inspiration that will be even more powerful. There is always that potential there that it'll actually be a good thing on balance rather than a bad thing.
Or we could just be turning them into little robots.
When you think of, we'll say, the likes of Greta Thunberg, she's grown up in maybe not quite this end of the technology world, but there are an awful lot of really wise and clear thinking and committed to the planet young people, so when I look at them, I'm inspired. I really, when I was her age, I wouldn't have had that courage. I wouldn't even have had that clarity. So I'm actually very inspired by young people, by their strength, by their commitment, by their ethical way of looking at life.
I think there's enough of, and I think that I've been taken aback at some of the younger people around. Now, the people I'm talking about would be, say, 19 to 26, that age group. So they're slightly older than Greta. But I was turned around one day and said, "Oh, I saw it on Facebook." And it said, "Surely you don't rely on Facebook for anything." They were hypercritical that I might be relying on Facebook for a piece of information. And they have a jadedness about the quality of data that I don't know where it came from, because it wasn't something they were taught,
They're
but they seem to
discerning.
have found a way of being more critical
Yeah.
that I don't remember them being taught, but they are very, very critical. And I think if that is what's coming out from the way the technology is being used by kids, actually, that's a good thing.
Yeah,
Yeah, and a
you
lot of them
actually
don't
could be
use
more
Facebook
critical.
because that's where their grannies hang out. So they don't
Yeah.
tend to use Facebook as much, or at least the younger
Yeah.
demographic.
it's
Yeah.
TikTok now, and it's even less time that you have to do it. It's all got
No,
to do.
they're now up to
Just
3
switch
minutes, I
people.
think, on TikTok. They've now
Are
got up
they?
to 3 minutes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But they're looking, and they're saying that, they are looking for information. And so when you have somebody like Greta Thunberg, or you have other, and they're looking at the world that they're coming into, they're looking out to see where they can learn, and that information is all there magically. So not all of it of good quality, well, I'm first to admit, but at least they're looking and they're exploring. So they're just using their own creativity in a very, very different way. It's just different from, we went into libraries and we read books. They use the tools they have, and their tool is the internet.
And I wonder if it's because when we went into libraries and looked at the books that were there, you believed what was in the books. So we've then just taken that belief of what's in the books, potentially, to belief to what we read online. And obviously, I think now more and more people are starting to get a little bit discerning as to what they're reading online, because there are so many things on there that are complete fake, and so many things that are contradictory. Absolutely. So I wonder if it's just the fact that we're taking a little bit longer to adapt to the fact that what's online isn't always the truth, whereas the younger generation have never gone through that process properly of, I've got to go to a library to get that textbook out, to get that research paper out. They've gone straight to Wikipedia, and they know from day one, you can't always trust every single thing that's written on these different websites.
So how do you get inspired?
Sorry, Leslie, go on.
No. How do you get inspired?
Well, I guess it's still that spark. What's triggered you wanting to go and look? So you start, and it's like me with the rabbit hole. You get onto a topic and you get a realization, and then sometimes you want to read absolutely everything there is about it. So there may be that chance that you'll start with Wikipedia, and then you'll follow the links of all the different reference documents at the bottom, and then you'll look at other indexes and you'll look for more information to try and get that really well-rounded picture. But that comes from that spark of, oh, I need to go know about that.
When I was a kid and I used to go into the library, there was a smell, and there was the smell of a book, and then there was the smell of all the books, and then there was the lady behind the counter who also had her own perfume and sort of strange things, that probably eau de cologne or something. But being so little and being in this room with just walls and walls and walls of books, and every single book I knew that was on that wall, on those walls, had information inside them that I didn't know yet. There were stories that I hadn't read yet.
But then the same can be true now of this.
Yeah.
Don't look at it that way.
But you don't.
But
Yeah.
I wonder, is that how the generation coming up is looking at it? That's their storybook.
Yeah, libraries don't run out of battery.
Everything's out of date as soon as it's printed in a library, isn't it? So,
everything's out of date as soon as it's posted on Facebook. Let's face it.
But it's always changing, isn't it? It's more up to date than a library and a book.
And it's potentially more environmentally friendly because you're not chopping down trees to print the books.
I don't know. You've got all these massive places, and somebody actually made the argument that there's these massive places, and I can't remember what they're called, where
Data centers
in the middle of the desert, they're actually using up more resources and spewing more carbon dioxide into the atmosphere. And we're getting more and more and more of these data centers because they need more and more of them, because the more people who are signing up and doing things like on computers, it's just as, if not more, environmentally dangerous.
Yeah, apparently there's currently a shortage of paper, believe it or not. So I was on a networking call this morning, and there was someone actually does print and was commenting that they're struggling to get paper in certain areas.
Gosh.
They used to make them out of old clothes as well, didn't they?
What, books?
Yeah, there's a paper making place in Wookey Hole, near Cheddar Gorge, and the ways of making paper there, the old-fashioned way, they still show you how to do it.
There you go.
It's interesting, but they used to use clothes as well. I mean, money used to be printed on cloth.
Yeah.
Now
It's on plastic. But somebody had a spark of inspiration to make them decide to go from cloth to paper and then paper to plastic.
Yeah, they didn't inspire themselves to not let the ink run though to begin with, did they?
Or that's just a part of the process that they've had to work through.
Honest, it's a tenner. Honest, it's a tenner.
So I'm wondering, is the inspiration for newer generations coming up and their magic, is their alchemy bound up with technology, but it may be bound up with other things too that we have yet to invent? So that we have inspiration for us that comes from that spark that might be in our bodies, it might be in the environment or something somebody says. But maybe as the next generations are coming up, their mix of things that inspire them is going to be different. So their alchemy of inspiration may actually be evolving.
Yeah, it's interesting. I think it's getting a little bit like Beatrix Potter's Time Mice and Country Mice. And it's a case of we're getting very much that way inclined, where nature is something that other people do. That if you don't live in a town, then nature's fine. But if you do live in a town, then that's the only thing that you're interested in, to a certain extent. And it happened a lot in Japan, that the crafts and the ways of being in Japan are dying out so fast, it's unbelievable, because all the kids want to be in the towns. They don't want to be in the country. And yet when people go to Japan, that's where they want to go. They want to see the old pagoda style houses and how they're done, and the craftsmanship and the way that things are built without nails, and all these beautiful things that they do with pottery and the making of the swords. Absolutely everything has a way of being done, but it's all being forgotten because the children don't want to do it.
But is that not another form of peer pressure as to what's cool? So when we were talking about adverts and the latest toy is what's cool to have in school, when you're looking at places like that, well, it's not cool to do these things anymore, and there's not enough money in them, and I can't progress. So actually I've got to move to the cities to be able to progress, because that's where it's cool.
It might be cool, but they're actually so overcrowded that they don't know what to do with themselves.
But that's beside the point, because it's cool.
Yeah, but this is how we're getting this thing, hikikomori again, and which is in self-induced isolation, and it's happening to people from the age of 19 onwards. They're just enclosing themselves in one room.
But then what we're finding in the UK is the fact that people are now working from home. They don't need to live in the cities. So house prices in the suburbs and in the sleeper and the dormitory villages and even further out into the country, house prices are going up because people are realising that they don't have to live in the city centre because their jobs are there. And actually, if they live out in the country, their job can be in the spare bedroom, or they can have a custom built office in their home and not be living in a 1-bedroom flat.
And hopefully they'll find that they don't have nature deficit disorder when they get there. Because that's a new invention. I wonder what inspired that.
I've never heard of that one.
Have you not?
New to me.
Seemingly, there are kids who are now afraid of going outside, and they won't go near trees or flowers or grass because they're terrified of them.
How bizarre.
Yeah.
We're talking about my very cute little nephew again. He's now going to forest school. So he gets to go and do bushcraft, which is great for a 2-year-old.
Or was
Yeah.
bathing.
How does he work the knives?
I don't think they give him knives quite yet. I think there's puddles to jump in, and there's
Mud.
things to play with.
Oh,
Yes,
so it's
And
just
I-
basically getting mucky craft.
but it's
I mean,
out in the forest.
I have a photograph of my son with a battery operated drill. He was 2.5 and he was drilling styrofoam. Perfectly fine. At 2, they can easily handle a drill. I'm sure they'd
wouldn't-
manage to
I
handle a
wouldn't
knife.
put
if
it
you-
past my nephew.
It can be done. There's always a way to do it.
He does enjoy a good cup of tea as well. So yeah, he's halfway there, right?
Can you make one yet?
I don't think so. I think he's got the button right for pushing for coffee, but I don't think he's got the button for, or the dexterity yet for making tea.
But there again, young child, 2 years old, there is inspiration. There is that curiosity about their world.
Yes.
And so it's going to come back to, if we want the children to be curious within a technological world, they have to be curious about technology, but it doesn't actually stop them being curious about other things too.
Mm.
So it still will come down to the parents nurturing curiosity. And if you nurture curiosity, you'll have inspiration. Could you have inspiration without curiosity?
Not sure. It's a bit like having a match without sulfur.
Just strikes me that, you know, inspiration can come in different ways and have different purposes. So, you know, sometimes inspiration is uplifting and good for mental health, you know, for well-being. And other forms of inspiration are, you know, it's useful for, it's like the mother of invention. When you have a problem, you try to solve the problem. And so you look for different ways and you get inspired as to what the solution is, a bit like Einstein in his bath. And so, you know, inspiration, I suppose, has different sources and different purposes. At the end of the day, it's all about survival. It's all about, you know, finding ways to be well and finding ways, when you are well, then to find new solutions to problems that allow you to go further. It's like each new generation is developing and moving forward.
I was thinking recently about the fact that we are 90% or 95% chimpanzee. And chimpanzees are really interesting animals because they inspire each other to do things. They teach each other things. They learn all the time. And up until a certain point, they were absolutely fine until something else came into their awareness. And they started to understand what greed was. Because basically, people were going out and filming them. And so they knew where they were going to be. They were dropping a whole load of fruit and bananas in a certain place and allowing them to come and pick it up. But that was when they started fighting over food. Then one of them, unfortunately, and it was a very famous case, one of them killed a baby, a human baby. And that was when things had to get changed, because they had inspired within that animal a territoriality and an idea that it could be what it wanted to be and take what it wanted to take, where normally it would be afraid of people and it would stay away. Now there was conflict and contention because it wanted to go far, they wanted to go farther and to do things differently. Well, things in the villages, etc., were staying the same. They weren't expecting to be attacked by a chimp because they had their things that they did, and the villagers had things that they did. But the food that the chimps were being fed and supplemented with was in the villages. That's where it was stored. And, you know, they're very clever animals. But I was wondering if it's a case of, once all that is taken away, do we get to a level where we get kind of complacent and we're happy where we are, familiar where we are, and so therefore we don't evolve any further? And is that what it is with human beings, that we are never happy where we are? We're always curious about what's going to be the better thing, and the grass is always greener. So we're going to evolve ourselves right out of it too.
A good question. I mean, I was watching today on TED Talks a lady living in the forest in the Amazon, and she was talking about how, you know, civilization had come in and kind of taken over all of their way of living and destroyed the forest, their whole way of living, you know, imposed religions on them that weren't theirs. They had their own spirituality. So, you know, sometimes we think we're so advanced, and actually we're destroying things that are even more advanced than us in many ways.
Yeah, I mean, we couldn't go and survive in the jungle without.
Well,
Then
bushcraft.
is that somebody else's spark of curiosity and imagination and inspiration to say, this is the best way, and I'm going to educate the world to do everything my way, because obviously my spark is more important than anyone else's.
Yeah, and it gives me power over everybody else too.
And that's dangerous too, right?
Mm. I mean, let's face it, it only took one spark to set the Amazon on fire. And it wasn't just a match.
What we forget is that the Amazon is really crucial to the well-being of the rest of the planet.
Yeah, but it's not just the Amazon either. I mean, we know already. We're educated enough, if we're curious enough, and somehow having all this availability of news from all around the world, we're not getting an awful lot of it. So
is it that we're not getting it, or is it that there's powers that be that decide,
are choosing what we
the
get to
power? And so it's back to the choice. That's the power. It's the money. It's what comes with it, and how much more money can I make if I do this? And actually, cutting down that isn't going to affect me in my lifetime. So what does it matter?
Well, if we're supposed to be forward thinking and thinking about our children and their children.
Who said we need to be forward thinking?
Well, we know that there are certain people who are not, who like to comb their hair over and talk a lot about shit, but there you go. It's, you know, yeah, there's a lot of different ways of being in the world, and inspiration and the way of how that inspiration is inspired, how it's actually spread around, how it jumps from person to person. And a lot of it's got to do with connection and community. A lot of it's got to do with expectations and how to live in a place and be part of that place instead of live from that place and suck all the life out of it.
So the kind of responsibility, there's like a need for consciousness and responsibility and forward thinking instead of just this moment and my needs.
Yeah, but I think that even some of the people that I'm talking about in Africa, for example, some of the tribes in Africa and the Kalahari, they don't think too far ahead. They know about the seasons, and they don't worry too much about that. But they inspire each other to do certain things and to make certain things and to lead a life that way, which is totally in alignment with the place where they live. They don't change the place where they live to suit them. They actually live within the means that is around that place. Until...
Is that because they don't know any different?
No, a lot of them do know differently now. A lot of them get mobile phones and watch football. Manchester United is actually very big in Africa.
Yeah.
So, you know, the other religion. But it's, yeah, this is what it is. I mean, how does that inspire? How does that inspire someone who has possibly never seen a football for years and years and years. Then suddenly somebody turns up with one and shows them what this game is. And then, you know, there's some of the best players in the world come from the Cameroons and different places in Africa as well. But it's mainly because I think they live differently. They've been brought up differently. They've had to, their muscles, everything grows so much because they have to walk and run different, you know, for longer periods of time.
Because they've not had a lift to work to school every
Yeah, they
morning.
haven't, you know, they don't sit in their backside eating their porridge in the morning, and then sort of like all they have to do is walk to the front door and get in the car and, you know, boogie on down to the office. It just doesn't happen that way. For many of them now it does, but you know, is that good?
Is it good or bad? It just is.
Yeah.
Just is. Yeah, I don't think it's about being good or bad. It's about just this difference. And I think that there is that sense in when I think that we can talk about being inspired, but only based on our perspective and our experience of the world. But I do think we need to be mindful that the future generations coming up have a very different perspective, and the feeding of their inspiration, their creativity, and their wonder is going to be different. And we may not always understand it.
I think that's true of everything. We have to be careful and not blanket sweeping generalization wise do this, and understand that each person is their own universe. They work their own way and are inspired within that universe by outside forces, yes, like meteorites coming from way deep in the void of space and coming into your little universe and said, oh wow, what was that? You know, and that's the only time that we start to kind of get involved with other people's, you know, orbits, where they're going and everything that's going on that way. We are energetic beings. Inspiration is an energetic thing. How we deal with that energy is the choice. And I think that what we've got to do as therapists particularly is to understand that we might be inspired to say something or do something or make a plan for someone when it comes to therapy or coaching. But actually, like we discussed earlier on, Mary, it actually starts with the other person, because you have to walk into their world and allow yourself to be in their world for a little bit to understand, you know, which parts they're going to be actually able to embrace. And they might do something or say something, and you could be sitting there going, how did that happen? What's going on with that? However, it's ecologically okay for them. And that's where it needs to be. It needs to be ecological.
Yep.
So we might think about toxic positivity next time. And goodness only knows where that will take us, because we've been all around the world with this one. And possibly out into the universe as well. So thank you, everybody. But
Thank you. It's been a pleasure.
it's been great fun. And I will see you again next time, hopefully.